Welcome back to Xbox On, where today we'll be talking about the greatest RPG games currently available on Xbox Game Pass across console, PC, and the cloud. So if everyday life feels just a little bit boring to you right now, why not try role-playing as somebody else?
Bringing Bethesda into the Xbox Game Studios family was a huge move, not least because it brought several of the most critically acclaimed RPGs of all time straight into Xbox Game Pass. The Elder Scrolls series has been Bethesda's pride and joy since the earliest days, letting players choose their own adventure inside a sprawling kingdom full of monsters, magic, and mystery. You can become a fearsome warrior, a noble hero, a wicked sorcerer, or just wander around picking up herbs. The possibilities really are endless. And Xbox Game Pass subscribers are now spoiled for choice when it comes to picking which game to play as well. You've got Oblivion, Skyrim, and the remastered version of Morrowind, all available and all upgraded to look especially fantastic on the Xbox One X. And thanks to the Xbox Series X and S's backwards compatibility features, Skyrim can now also run at a magical 60 FPS on next-gen consoles that also smooth scrolls action that we all know and love.
And while we're talking about Bethesda games, Sam, the Fallout games have enjoyed a megaton of success ever since the series was revamped with Fallout 3, finding a unique way to combine first-person shooting mechanics with the vast open worlds and complex narratives they'd honed on the Elder Scrolls. Fallout 3 and 4 provide some of the most expansive single-player experiences you will find quite literally anywhere, challenging you to make your way through the scorched remains of America, fending off super mutants and unraveling conspiracies as you go. Then, if your days alone in the desert are beginning to get to you, you can boot up Fallout 76 instead to take the action online. There's plenty of season updates, new content arrivals, and new people to play with, adding plenty of depth to an already incredibly detailed world. Or if you're feeling lucky, you could head over to Fallout's take on Las Vegas, a place that was known for being a little dicey even before it got microwaved. All the same, New Vegas provides one of the best stories Fallout has ever told, and it's full of the kind of fraught ethical dilemmas that these dark RPGs thrive on.
But if you prefer your RPGs served up with swords and sorcery rather than spaceships and science, there's the Fable Trilogy, all of which is available on Xbox Game Pass courtesy of backwards compatibility. The Fable games are basically third-person action adventures where you travel the land taking on quests and fighting bad guys with a mixture of armed combat and magic spells. But while many recent fantasy RPGs take on a grimmer, more Game of Thrones-ish vibe, Fable's world is distinctly lighter and brighter, offering a fantasy epic with a lot more humour and a bit less horror. And with the new game coming to Xbox in the future, now is the perfect time to get yourself acquainted with the quirks and customs of Albion. Just don't go kicking too many chickens, alright?
Of course, no list of RPGs could possibly be complete without mention of the Final Fantasy series, which has been synonymous with the genre for decades. Final Fantasy VII is still considered one of the high watermarks for traditional turn-based RPGs and for gaming in general, really, thanks to its memorable characters, enchanting techno-fantasy world, and heart-rending story. Seriously, we still haven't recovered from that death, more than 20 years later. Oh, stop. That classic is on Xbox Game Pass, as well as the immediate follow-up Final Fantasy VIII, which has been lovingly remastered so that its sweeping story still has the same sense of scale and grandeur that it hit with back in the day. And later entries like Final Fantasy X, X-2, and Final Fantasy XII, The Zodiac Age are also there, so there's quite literally hundreds of hours of Final Fantasy fun to be had. Basically, Xbox Game Pass is a ticket straight to heaven for classic JRPG fans, regardless of whether they're playing on console or PC.
You touch down on a new planet as part of a Hail Mary attempt to give humanity a shot at a brighter future. And at a glance, your new homeworld looks pretty ideal, full of lively green plant life and great wide vistas, which look especially enticingly viewed on the Xbox Series X's 4K 60 display. And then things start to go wrong, pretty wrong. Well, a freak electrical storm puts you in a coma and you awaken years later to find that your new Eden has fallen into a sort of Mad Max-ish inferno full of warring clans and horrifying monsters. Happy days. Fortunately, you also find that you've developed some pretty nifty superpowers which should help you put the brakes on those aspiring road warriors. So much of the fun in Outriders comes from finding all of the different ways you can upgrade the different abilities on offer, and how best to combine them with the game's vast array of conventional weaponry. You can play together with two other mates to really showcase those powers, because even on this hellish new planet, variety is still the spice of life.
While Wasteland 3 does take us back to Earth, it hasn't felt much more like home since a nuclear winter turned the whole dang place into an Arctic nightmare. Wander through its frozen plains and you'll find a refugee crisis, a fascist police force, a smattering of clown-themed bandits, and a violent cult who worship none other than Ronald Reagan. So it's kinda safe to say that this is another place where you'll want to be employing the buddy system and bring a friend along for the ride. Ideally, a friend with access to a large amount of firepower and a pretty flexible sense of right and wrong. Thanks to its isometric XCOM-style combat, Wasteland 3 pushes you to consider every single move before you make it, like an especially cold, bloody game of chess. But even if you're planning 3 moves ahead, you'll probably still find yourself regretting how some things play out because of how morally twisted Wasteland 3's story is, with minor decisions often incurring massive consequences. Because in a world that's gone this wrong, there just aren't any easy choices left to make.
Up next, we have Obsidian Entertainment's latest addition to the RPG pantheon, The Outer Worlds, which has a sequel on its way, by the way, at some point, we don't know when. That's pretty much all we know from all of their brilliantly tongue-in-cheek trailer at this summer's Xbox and Bethesda Game Showcase. This space opera envisions a world where giant corporations control everything, and it's really not going so well. You know, that old chestnut. Anyway, the cosmos has now been effectively colonized, and you play as a character only known as the Stranger, who wanders between planet to planet, helping out oppressed people, making friends, and generally being a swell space guy, or gal, whatever you want. Essentially a first-person shooter with lots and lots of RPG elements. The game features tons of fascinating locales to visit, and lots of futuristic equipment to help you on your way, including true science fiction classics like the Shrink Ray. Anyway, it's a perfect way to prep and then be at the front of the line when The Outer Worlds 2 arrives into the library as well. And at last, the final frontier is just a button press away.
The Yakuza series has always had a unique way of blending the relatively grounded crime drama of its main story with the absolute madness that goes on in the side missions. Not only does Like a Dragon introduce a brand new protagonist and a turn-based battle system, but it totally collapses this boundary. Because it turns out that leaning hard into its RPG side was just the excuse the series needed to let its freak flag fly. Kamurocho is alive with colour and detail as ever, with all the hustle and bustle you would expect from a modern day city. And it really does feel like a living, breathing place, especially with the 4K resolution and 60 frames per second frame rate offered on the Xbox Series X. But then the battles start and things suddenly start to feel a lot less lifelike. You'll find yourself fending off enemies using everything from breakdancing to birthday cakes, frying pans to full-on suits of medieval armor. Honestly, it makes the previous Yakuza encounters where 2 dudes would just get shirtless and duke it out in the middle of a shopping center seem relatively calm in comparison.
While Like a Dragon might test the boundaries of reality sometimes, Cris Tales is happy to tear up the whole space-time continuum. This anime-styled JRPG regularly splits the screen in 3, allowing you to see the past, present, and future versions of wherever you are. That means you could potentially gain an advantage over your enemies by moving them or yourself into the right section of time. Yes, you heard me correctly. While outside of battle, it means you get a very immediate sense of how the choices you are making affect the world around you. It's a bit like Tenet, only with less finely tailored suits and more talking frogs. Not that those chatty amphibians look all that out of place in the world of Cris Tales. It's full of witches, wizards, robots, cities, and they all sit within active volcanoes and boats made from giant shoes. Basically, it's a place where you'll have a lot more fun if you don't ask too many questions. And if you're able to follow that rule, you'll find one of the most mind-bogglingly inventive JRPGs we've seen in quite a long time.
The Ascent drops you into a futuristic world that is absolutely stunning, filled with dazzling spacecraft, towering metallic buildings, and the moody glow of neon lights. But even with the added boost of 4K and 60 frames per second on the Xbox Series X and S, all the bright lights and beautiful skylines in the world can't change the fact that things are not going very well there at all. After the mega corporation which ruled everything suddenly collapsed, the place was thrown into a state of total disarray, with rival factions staking their claim to different territories and settling their disputes in a less than diplomatic fashion. Because even though we've learned to cybernetically upgrade our own bodies, we still haven't learnt to share, guys. All the same, those upgrades will come in awfully handy in this twin-stick RPG as you steadily blast your way from one section to another, earning even better augmentations as you go. Because sharing is nice and all, I guess, but a great big laser gun will certainly get you a lot further.
So there we have it. Basically, whether you like your RPGs old school and turn-based, or modern and action-packed, Xbox Game Pass is a veritable feast of role-playing goodness. But be sure to let us know in the comments if we missed any of your favourites, leave us a like if you enjoyed the video, and we will see you next time. Bye bye!